Yesterday, in an answer to Senator Kennedy, you said the FBI is not in possession of any credible evidence that Epstein trafficked girls to anyone but himself. So according to your testimony yesterday and in this committee, according to the evidence the FBI has, the number of names on the list are zero. Zero. The index has been released and the number of people involved in that trafficking operation were charged in 2018. Other than Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, your testimony in the Senate and here is that according to the evidence you have, the number of other names is zero that were charged. Based on credible evidence, who are the other names? Give me the other names that weren't charged. 3 minutes earlier, nothing about that room suggested history was about to happen. Thursday afternoon, 2:47 p.m. Eastern, when C-SPAN footage usually becomes background noise for empty offices. This was supposed to be another forgettable hearing. Kash Patel walked in carrying himself like a man who had survived far worse. His shoulders were squared, his posture controlled, his navy suit tailored with quiet precision. He had endured hostile interviews, media storms, and more than 100 congressional hearings, each one reinforcing the same lesson that experience teaches quickly in Washington. Stay calm, say little, give nothing away. 3 lawyers flanked him, their presence subtle but unmistakable, while 2 senior aides settled into the seats behind him with binders already open. Everything about Patel suggested preparation, confidence, and expectation of control. The first 90 minutes unfolded exactly according to script. Republican questions about staffing, Democratic questions about January 6th. Patel gave polished, evasive answers he'd perfected over years. He nodded, acknowledged concerns, emphasized procedures. At one point, he checked his watch. The man looked bored, and that was precisely the point. Then Jared Moskowitz's name was called. There was nothing dramatic in the way he began. Director Patel, Moskowitz said, his tone casual, "I want to talk about transparency." Patel nodded, the practiced nod of someone who believes he understands the conversation. Of course, because transparency is the safest word in Washington. The FBI is committed to operating with the utmost transparency. Within the bounds of, "That's great," Moskowitz interrupted, smiling though not warmly. The smile was precise, controlled, prosecutorial. "Because I have some documents here that I think the American people deserve to see." He lifted a thick crimson folder onto the desk, heavy, tabbed with yellow sticky notes, dense enough to suggest months of resistance. The kind of folder that announces its purpose before a single page is turned. "Congressman," Patel said evenly, "I'm happy to discuss any materials that have been properly cleared for." "These are cleared," Moskowitz cut in. "Declassified as of 11 p.m. last night. Public domain. Which means I can read them out loud, right here, right now, and there is not a damn thing you can do to stop me." The room shifted. Senator Lindsey Graham looked up from his phone. Senator Dick Durbin leaned forward. The C-SPAN camera operator adjusted focus. Everyone understood something irreversible was about to occur. Moskowitz opened the folder. "These are FBI documents related to the Jeffrey Epstein investigation. Specifically, materials detailing individuals who visited Epstein's properties, flew on his aircraft, and appear in witness testimony." He looked directly at Patel. "You're familiar with these files, correct?" "Congressman, the FBI maintains extensive records related to many investigations. I'm about to show you the specific," Moskowitz said, pulling out the first page. "This is a visitor log from Epstein's Palm Beach residence, dated March 14, 2003. He began reading names aloud. The first 3 meant nothing to the public. Anonymous figures lost to history. The fourth was a hedge fund manager whose association with Epstein had already been reported years earlier. Nothing explosive yet." Then Moskowitz read the 5th name. The silence was immediate and absolute. Not the polite quiet of an audience listening carefully, but the kind of silence that occurs when 50 people collectively stop breathing. "Director Patel," Moskowitz continued, his voice harder now, "this name appears 17 times in these logs over a 6-month period. 17 documented visits." He held the page up for the cameras. "And yet, when Congress requested these documents 2 years ago, they were classified as too sensitive to release. Why?" Patel reached for his water glass. His hand was steady, but the pause before he spoke said everything. Congressman, classification decisions involve complex considerations regarding privacy, ongoing investigations. There is no ongoing investigation. Moskowitz snapped. Epstein is dead. Maxwell is in prison. This is not about protecting an investigation. This is about protecting powerful people. Then Moskowitz pulled out a second document, thicker, with official letterhead. This is a flight manifest from Epstein's private jet dated July 22, 2000. The passenger list includes 4 names. 3 have been made public over the years. He paused. The 4th name was redacted in every previous release of this document. Redacted under your authority, Director Patel, 3 months after you took office. Patel opened his mouth, but Moskowitz raised his hand. I'm not finished. This redacted name appears on 12 separate flight manifests. 12 flights to Palm Beach, New York and the U.S. Virgin Islands. He looked directly at Patel. That redaction was removed last night during a classification review, which means for the first time the American public can see who was on those flights. He turned the document toward the cameras. Even on C-SPAN footage, the signature at the bottom was visible. Within 90 seconds, social media erupted. Patel's attorney leaned forward, whispering urgently. Patel shook his head slightly. Congressman, Patel said, his voice quieter now, flight manifests from over 20 years ago without additional context. Let me give you context. Moskowitz interrupted. He pulled out another page. This is witness testimony from a woman who worked at Epstein's Manhattan residence between 1999 and 2002. Her statement given to the FBI in 2009 described seeing the same individual multiple times at Epstein's property. Moskowitz read directly from the document. He was there at least 5 or 6 times that I personally saw. Always evenings, always with Jeffrey. They seemed like old friends. The gallery gasped audibly. The sound of 50 people realizing they were watching something that could not be undone. Director Patel, this testimony has been in FBI files for 16 years. Why was it classified? Patel started to respond but caught himself mid-sentence. Congressman, the slip was small, but in that room it was fatal. Blood in the water. The correction hung in the air longer than any accusation could have. Patel's slip from senator to congressman was minor on its face, but in Washington small mistakes reveal large truths. It exposed not confusion but pressure, the kind that builds when a witness realizes the script has been taken away. For 16 years that testimony had sat inside FBI files, untouched, unseen and unchallenged. 16 years of silence suddenly demanded an explanation. The FBI does not classify documents to protect individuals, Patel said carefully, resetting his posture. Classification protocols exist to safeguard sensitive information. And your protocols protected this individual, Moskowitz cut in, his tone now stripped of all pretense. And we both know why. The shift was unmistakable. This was no longer oversight theater. It was confrontation. Moskowitz didn't pause for reaction. He reached back into the crimson folder and removed another document, then another, stacking them deliberately in front of Patel like evidence laid out before a jury. Each page represented a decision, a delay, a denial, a moment where disclosure had been avoided. These documents were requested by Congress 2 years ago. Each time they were denied under the same justification. Classification. Patel listened without interruption. His expression controlled but no longer confident. His breathing had changed, subtle but visible, measured inhales meant to maintain composure under pressure. Director Patel, at no point during your tenure has the FBI informed this committee that any investigation into these individuals was ongoing, and yet classification remained in place. Congressman, the absence of an active prosecution does not automatically justify the release of materials that could impact privacy or national security. Privacy concerns don't justify redacting the same name across flight manifests, visitor logs, witness testimony, and photographic evidence. Moskowitz reached into the folder. This time he removed a color photograph, an 8x10 print mounted on cardstock. He held it up slowly. This photo was taken at Mar-a-Lago in 1997. It has been public for years. Everyone here has seen it. The image showed two men smiling, arms around each other's shoulders, relaxed, familiar, unmistakably friendly. But Moskowitz was already reaching for more. What the public hasn't seen, he said, are these. He produced a stack of additional photographs, flipping through them one by one. 32 photographs from that same event. Photographs that have been sitting in FBI evidence storage. Photographs that you, Director Patel, have refused to release. Patel's forehead glistened under the hearing room lights. Not metaphorically but visibly, the sheen of sweat catching reflections as he shifted. His attorney passed him a folded note. Patel glanced at it briefly, then pushed it aside. Congressman, the release of investigatory photographs requires careful review to ensure we do not compromise. Compromise what? Moskowitz interrupted, slamming his hand onto the desk. The microphone jumped, the sharp sound echoing through the chamber. Epstein is dead. Maxwell is in prison. There are no ongoing prosecutions to compromise. The force of the moment rippled through the room. Staffers whispered urgently to one another. Reporters began reaching for their phones. Several senators exchanged looks that betrayed discomfort rather than surprise. Moskowitz stood up. In 6 years of covering congressional hearings, I had never seen that happen during questioning. The rules do not explicitly forbid it. But the culture does. Standing breaks the illusion of order, the unspoken agreement that power will remain seated and controlled. Moskowitz did not care. Director Patel, he said, now towering over the desk, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want a yes or no answer. Can you do that? Patel nodded slowly, his eyes betraying dread. Has the FBI under your leadership conducted any investigation into the individuals named in these Epstein documents? The silence that followed was total. Not the kind of pause used for emphasis, but a vacuum, empty and consuming. 23 seconds passed. In a congressional hearing, 23 seconds is an eternity. Patel looked down at his papers, then at his lawyers. They offered nothing. He glanced back toward his aides, who stared fixedly at their laps. He was alone. The FBI, Patel finally said, his voice barely above a whisper, pursues all credible leads in accordance with established investigative priorities and resource allocation frameworks. Moskowitz laughed. It was not humor, but disbelief sharpened into sound. That is a no. You just used 73 words to say no. He gathered his documents deliberately, signaling that the moment of questioning was giving way to judgment. Let me tell you what I see. Director Patel, I see an FBI that spent more time investigating parents at school board meetings than investigating Jeffrey Epstein's clients. I see an agency that classified documents to protect powerful people, not national security. I see a director appointed by one of the men named in these files, a director who owes his career to that man, and a director who spent 11 months burying evidence connecting that man to a convicted child sex trafficker. The room erupted, not in applause or shouting, but in movement. Phones came out everywhere. Staffers rushed to doors. Senator Graham called for order, his voice barely cutting through the noise. Senator Durbin looked stunned, his expression frozen somewhere between concern and calculation. Patel remained seated, motionless, his mask finally gone. But Moskowitz was not finished. I have one more document, he said, holding up a single sheet of paper, and this one matters more than all the rest. This is a Department of Justice memo dated March 27, 2024, 3 months after you became FBI Director. He read aloud. Classification Review Board is directed to conduct expedited review of all Epstein-related materials containing references to current or former government officials. Moskowitz looked up slowly, letting the words sink in. It's signed by your deputy director. Did you authorize this memo, Director Patel? Patel's mouth opened then closed. I don't recall the specific. You don't recall, Moskowitz repeated slowly, deliberately. You don't recall ordering the reclassification of documents that protected your boss's friends? He held the paper higher. This memo resulted in 23 documents being reclassified. 23 documents that had previously been cleared for release, and every single one of them contained references to the same name. The same name on the flight logs. The same name in witness testimony. The same name in the photographs you won't release. That is not coincidence. That is obstruction. That is a cover-up. And you are sitting here under oath. Congressman, I categorically reject any implication that the FBI has acted improperly or with political motivation. Your commitment, Moskowitz cut him off, is to the man who appointed you. Your commitment is to a power structure that protects itself. Your commitment is to ensuring that certain people never face consequences. The hearing technically continued after that. Other senators asked questions about cybersecurity, foreign threats. No one was listening. Everyone understood the damage had already been done. By that evening, legal analysts parsed the exchange line by line. Cable news cut into programming. Clips circulated across platforms. Patel's 23 seconds of silence looped endlessly. Phones rang in offices never meant to ring during routine oversight. The wall had cracked. The story had escaped. What made the moment dangerous was not the documents alone. Those had existed for years, buried in files, classified and reclassified, passed between departments with no urgency. What changed was that the documents had been shown publicly, on camera under oath. Once that happened, plausible deniability evaporated. The paper trail had a witness. Moskowitz understood that better than anyone in the room. He did not need Patel to confess. He needed him to fail. And failure in Washington is often measured not by lies, but by evasions that everyone recognizes as such. The absence of a yes became louder than any admission. The performance of neutrality collapsed under its own weight. 3 minutes. That was all it took to disrupt years of managed ambiguity, to convert classified silence into public record, to force power to confront its own paper trail. Washington had seen moments like this before, but never quite like this. The Epstein files were no longer rumor or theory. They were evidence entered into congressional history. And once history records something, the future must respond. The story did not end with the gavel. It began there.